Hey, this is Media Mystic, and I'm recording at 10:04 p.m. at night. Why am I recording this late? Well, I don't know. I just felt like making a random video, I guess. Oh, I can share you my thoughts on Paranormal Activity 2. So I just finished watching Paranormal Activity 2, which is the prequel and sequel to the original Paranormal Activity movie. And don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into a horror review or anything like paranormal related, at least so far. But because my channel is going to cover paranormal topics anyways, I feel like talking about this movie, at least for a brief moment. So yeah, Paranormal Activity 2 is the prequel to the original Paranormal Activity film. This movie is directed by Todd Williams, was written and forgot the writer all of a sudden. Forgot. Even though I just saw the end credits. But yeah, directed by Todd Williams. It stars some of the original characters, Katie Featherston and Mika Slott in this movie, who reprised their respective roles from the Paranormal Activity, the first movie. And then, okay, so I'm going to give you my brief thoughts of the movie. So let's just go with that. I won't be concerned with the cast and crew or every single plot detail, but let's just put it this way. Paranormal Activity 2 was very good at building up that suspense, right? It was very good at heightening the tension as the movie went on. It didn't show much of the ghost, which I thought was great because it allowed the imagination to, run wild on what the entity, is and how and what its role is in the second movie, as it torments the Reyes family who live in this house, and they suspect that the ghost is haunting them. They start seeing things like the furniture and the inside of the house has been vandalized. Initially, they thought it was burglary, and then they see the objects in the pool being moved around and things like that. And then the baby hunter is, he starts sensing the ghost, and then the dog Abby, which is a German Shepherd dog, starts noticing that something's off, and the parents, Daniel and Christy, initially dismiss it, and even their housekeeper, nanny, Maritime, who warns them in Spanish, of course, that, que tienes que mantener los espíritus malos de aquí y los espíritus buenos. She said that. So that is something that the movie builds up on. And then as it goes along, and we see it through the cameras, through the security camera surveillance system that they've set up to see if they can catch anybody or anything messing with their house furniture. I really like that too. They don't just set up a camera just for the sake of it, for the plot. They set up the camera because they are trying to catch whoever or whatever was behind the house burglary. And it also adds to the believability that yes, people increasingly are using security in order to monitor, not only their own actions, but also any outside actions that could happen, especially in the wake of 9/11, because you've got to remember that the Paranormal Activity films came out in the 2000s, 2010s era. It was when paranormal films, still had a very different vibe compared to today. They were more grounded, they were more minimalistic, and they drew a lot of inspiration from the Blair Witch Project, especially with the found footage genre. And this is when the found footage genre was still going strong in its early internet phase, right? Today, found footage still exists, it's still popular, but it's more analog horror or more based on franchises, or more expanded from the more minimalist approach that the Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch Project films all took, right? So that's a detail that I really like about Paranormal Activity 1 and 2, where the characters are not just setting up security cameras for the plot to happen, they're also setting it up so that way they can capture what is going on there, whether it's something ordinary like people moving around, people living their lives, people eating, talking, chatting, or just hanging out with their families, or in the case of Paranormal Activity, to really catch ghost activity. And in the broader historical, cultural sense, yes, it was, I believe, in response to the increased surveillance that people feel like needed to be heightened up, especially in the wake of 9/11 and the Bush administration, where more security was going on, and the Bush administration was basically monitoring everyone's actions on their phones, and it led to that huge debate that even still goes on today as technology has advanced more, with surveillance capitalism and surveillance just tracking everyone's movements, everyone's data, you know what I mean? It's something that people continually debate about, how much security can compromise too much freedom, you know what I mean? It's one of those debates that that naturally I feel like a movie, especially with cameras, will spark. And something like Paranormal Activity, it sparks similar, questions when it comes to how much security is are we willing to partake in, until it goes too much, until it spies on literally everyone's actions, everyone's, private moments and things like that, even if it's done for the greater good, right? To capture any suspicious activity, and in this case is ghost hauntings, or ghost activity, or paranormal activity. I should call it like that. So yeah, Paranormal Activity 2, I really liked the movie. I thoroughly enjoyed the pacing. Also, it is more of a slower pace kind of film, where despite the runtime being only like 90 minutes, the movie, goes along and doesn't try to rush, through scenes. It lets you sit through the scenes as we see, the things being moved, or family members walking in, enjoying stuff, talking to each other. And Hunter, being the baby, the newest member of the Reyes family, really plays a role in this, because he's a baby, he's very vulnerable, he's being raised by parents who are very busy. They live in a middle income class home, in which they are trying to go out there and, do whatever they work. The movie never elaborates on what exactly they work on. What is their line of work? What is their profession? Yeah, the movie doesn't elaborate on that. But because of their middle class income house, I'm assuming that they do some sort of profession that pays well. I'm assuming. But yeah, the movie is able to show us these details without elaborating too much on it. And this is where, it sets the context for the setting to happen. Because if the movie simply took place in a house, someone else's house, and it didn't set up all that stuff, yeah, it wouldn't have worked. So I'm really glad that this movie was able to set up, the things that would set the stage for the first movie, but also tell its own story about this family who's connected to Katie and Mika, in some way, because they are related in some shape or form. Yeah, they are related. And that's how this movie ends. Spoiler alert, I for a movie that is now more than 15 years old, I guess, but the movie ends where the first movie ended, and it basically gives you a hint of where it's going from there, especially with the third movie. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. This is the kind of horror I really like. I like horror that's minimalistic, that's found footage, that trusts the audience to sit with it, rather than forcing, jump scares every now and then, or trying to explain complex lore, or trying to push some sort of socio-political agenda on the audience. I'm not against politics in a horror movie, not against it at all, but there's countless examples of horror movies that have political undertones or ideological agenda that distracts from it, or is not well done, or it's clearly done to convey some sort of message that I don't agree with. And most modern horror nowadays, let's be honest, it's just too much. Like, it's oversaturated to the point where, I just don't enjoy it. It's just like, the horror fandom really is always trying to recommend you to watch this horror movie, watch that horror movie, or watch this one. I'd love to go into more detail about this, of course, because the horror genre really is a genre that I'd like to cover in more detail, especially on this channel, where I like to analyze the themes, or the plot structure, or the reoccurring tropes, or elements that are always, popping up here and there. But at the end of the day, the horror genre, like any genre, is not immune to criticism. We have to criticize it. We have to look at the things that work and look at the things that don't work. Why do people like these kind of horror films? Why do people like these kind of horror films? You know what I mean? I like horror that's found footage, that's more restrained, that's more minimalistic, that's more realistic also. And it allows room for interpretation on what it means. Was it a haunting? Was it psychological? Is it metaphorical? You know what I mean? Paranormal Activity is more explicit about the fact that, yes, it is a ghostly entity, but we don't know its true nature. We don't know why it's haunting this family. There's hints in the movies that shows, a long history that goes back. But even then, that's open to interpretation, not something that any YouTube analysis video will try to say, oh, this is my definitive interpretation. And there's horror YouTube channels that try to do that anyways, because they're doing it for the algorithm. And speaking of which, yeah, modern horror really is just done for algorithmic purposes. And I can tell that because they're becoming more self-referential and more doing it because studios are prioritizing that kind of style over things like, suspense or dread or realism or existential themes or a minimalist approach, or trying to actually scare people with ideas and with the right place of moments that actually delivers these scares. Yeah, that's something that modern horror now is thoroughly lacking. And speaking of modern horror, yes, I'm aware that a 2026 movie called Obsession just came out. It's a movie about a girl who gets stalked by a guy on social media, and this guy seems to be like this cute, outgoing boyfriend, but actually wants to stalk her. Yeah, I have heard some things about that. Oh yes, in the Backrooms movie that just came out by Kane Parson. Yes, he's the director, and he's the first Gen Z director to really make a movie that of his generation that is already successful at the box office. The movie has gained over 80 million at the box office. Yeah, and on a $10 million budget or less, I think. Yeah, very impressive. I might check out the Backrooms movie. I just haven't had the chance of going out to see it. But yeah, I am interested in that. It's interesting to see that younger filmmakers are coming in to make, adapting a well-known creepypasta urban legend on the internet, which is the Backrooms, and turning that into feature films. Yeah, it's great to see that. Makes me compelled to go see the movie at some point, if I get the chance, and I'll probably share my thoughts on it here on YouTube. But yeah, and why do I bring all of this up? I bring all of this up because, well, I feel like people's definition of horror will differ. You know what I mean? My version of horror isn't the same as your version of horror, and because the horror genre is so oversaturated, it's like which one is which, right? Like, which ones appeal to me the most? Which ones do I not like? At the end of the day, because it's not something that I'm compelled to watch all the time. I don't watch horror movies all the time. I watch films of other genres. But if I do watch something horror, it's usually something of my taste. Like I've already said, I like found footage. I like psychological, some of it at least to an extent. I like some supernatural horror because of the ambiguity and how it uses the rhythm to build up suspense, right? I like some slashers that are not extremely violent, but are, again, more about the suspense and more about what the characters mean, what they represent. Oh, and yeah, and analog horror. I do like, when they take internet horror, and it's, again, when it's done right, it genuinely can work, which is why the Backrooms movie, I do want to check it out, because it is based on a horror creepypasta property, which is the Backrooms, but that's more internet based, and so they took that and made it into a feature film that everyone's talking about, and it's gotten very good reviews. And yes, it is very successful at the box office right now. And like I said, first Gen Z movie to be considered successful, which is great to see. But yeah, the thing I wanted to bring up was that this is something that I really want to bring into the table, right? I really want to bring in that sort of minimalistic, bare bones, get to the point kind of films, right? I like that kind of filmmaking that is not too concerned with trying to get all the right details, but delivers nonetheless. And if there is something that I feel it doesn't get right, I'm gonna change it. Maybe I'll revise it, refine it, or keep doing it until I feel it's correct. Because that's the thing about film, right? Is that you gotta keep doing it until you feel it's correct, right? That's why reshoots happen. That's why it's normal on film productions to retake the same scene over and over again to make sure that it hits right, make sure that the dialogue scenes are perfect and the actors memorize it. Because if you don't, that's going to be very hard to do all in one take, right? One take shots can't happen, absolutely. You can. And when I was watching Paranormal Activity 2, I didn't notice this, but now that I've mentioned it, it makes me wonder, how do they do a lot of these scenes and have them feel so naturalistic? Because when you watch it, you don't really notice it. You don't really notice that it's acting. You just kind of assume, oh, it's real people living their lives and they happen to be haunted by a supernatural entity. And when they're talking with the dialogue and all that stuff, a lot of it feels either improvised, or it feels like they read the script and they rehearsed it many times and then just acted out anyways. That's very interesting how they did that. It makes me want to watch behind the scenes footage of Paranormal Activity, the franchise, right? to see how do they got that correctly. You know, how do the actors memorize these lines and act it out in a way that feels naturalistic. It feels like real people talking, you know, while living inside suburban homes, you know, living out their lives and doing the things that people do to work, live, eat, sleep, you know, have be with family and things like that. And yet, in the back of my mind, I don't think, oh wow, that's, you know, how many reshoots that they did, you know, how many lines had they had to rehearse. Yeah, I didn't notice that, and that's the thing I like about the films that I was watching, Paranormal Activity 1 and 2, and then the later sequels. When I get down to the franchise's later entries, that it's so stunning that they got that correctly to the point where you don't notice it, right? You don't notice when the actors had to like say a line here or say a line here or re say the line. You know, they did it in a way that kept on going. It kept building momentum, and you didn't really question it. It just felt like real life. Yeah, and that's something that I really appreciate about the movies. That's why I don't mind rewatching them, and that's why I really like this about found footage. And I think it helps too that many of the shots, because they were taken by security camera shots that were set up, you know, in corners of the house, all around, that the actors didn't need to, you know, they didn't need to be aligned so perfectly with the camera, right? They could just retake the shot, maybe say a line, but at the end of the day, they're still in front of the shot, right? And the cameras that are set up to look like security cameras, yeah, that's already there. But with the handheld stuff, I can imagine that, yeah, they had to redo some of that stuff. They had to retake it, re-utter some of the lines that they might have forgotten, or they need to improvise. Yeah, and I do value improvisation where if you don't remember the line, just say whatever comes to mind, right? I really like that too. And much of what I'm saying right now is improvisation. There we go. Where I'm just saying what comes out of my mind, and I don't worry too much about going according to our script, because it has the potential to like limit your creative expression and what you feel internally about the topic that you're going into. So that's why going off script really helps, right? And many of my videos, if you've noticed, have been off script. But yeah, I really like that about the Paranormal Activity films. I thought the actors also did a great job too. I'd love to go into more detail about each character, but I think I'm saving that for an analysis where I touch on the characters, the plot, and the themes of the Paranormal Activity films, and why I feel like these films are significant, not just because they're found footage horror films, but because the cultural outlook that they convey through its on-screen depiction of the events going on really has something to say about, you know, this kind of horror that really resonated with audiences back in the 2000s, right? Because you had a lot of horror franchises coming out in the 2000s. You had Saw, you had Final Destination, you had Paranormal Activity, you had remakes of classic horror movies, which I argue were all pretty pointless. I didn't think we needed a remake of The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or a remake of Halloween by Rob Zombie, or even a Nightmare on Elm Street remake. They feel kind of pointless because they add to the original movie, and they either change things to the point where like, why did they add these changes? I didn't need to see these changes, or it's done for the sake of shock value. Because remember, 2000s, you know, you had that sort of grungy shock value, roller coaster energy, horror films. Saw movies conveyed that pretty well. And what they tried to do was turn that into an aesthetic that was well known in the 2000s, when horror movies, you know, really were associated with things like gore or violence or edgy, you know, content, or, you know, grungy aesthetics rather. That's when the horror genre, this was pre-algorithmic, by the way, pre-social media, pre-internet horror, where horror was seen as something that was more shocking in terms of its aesthetics, not in terms of the subject matter or the social commentary, right? It was before elevated horror, that's what they call it. Because elevated horror, the modern horror genre that we see now, that's what I have issues with, because a lot of them stop feeling like horror and feel more like vessels to explore themes that horror, they're just using horror to convey, but not everybody will agree with those themes. Not everybody will agree with how it's done, right? I strongly criticize algorithmic horror because it's done for the algorithm. It's not done to generate actual fear moments. It's not done to create moments that will really stick with you after you watch it. Because what happens is that you watch these films that are made by studios that are now prioritizing, algorithmic engagement, that are prioritizing like self-referential material, or is really making something that just feels weirdly out of touch, right? Like it feels out of touch with the broader social political sphere, at least to an extent that I don't take it seriously. How many horror films, let's be honest, are based on COVID? Very little. How many horror films are based on actual systemic crises that are going on? Not much, right? Like, these are things that frustrate me because horror is meant to reflect the real world anxieties. And even when they do that, it's still not done correctly because I feel like the execution of it really, it's not perfect, I mean, even the horror films that people love, like the original Halloween or the original Scream or Nightmare on Elm Street or modern horror like Get Out or what else? Hereditary or Don't Breathe or The Purge or X or what's another one? This year's Obsession. I mean, they all have flaws, and I strongly criticize many of these because they prioritize a different like landscape to them that isn't really what I typically associate horror with. And I feel like the found footage genre is a sweet middle ground where you can cover social commentary, but you can also rely on found footage, not just as a gimmick, but as a way to actually examine people's lives through media and through technology, which is something that is increasingly relevant. That's what makes Paranormal Activity, the films in general, very relevant, even more than 15 years later, because we live in that era where you and I can use technology, media, and surveillance systems, and video cameras, and hell, film and phone cameras in general, to record the lives that we live in. And when we see through people's lives, we get a glimpse of what they think, what they value, where they work, their norms, their microcultural sphere. Because in every household, it's a different world, right? We all live in the same world, but each person lives in their own internal world. And the house or place that they live is really just a manifestation of their own, inner home, if you want to call it that. And through the use of cameras, whether film or video or phone cameras or even simply just security cameras, we see that glimpse of that world that these characters live in, even when they share the same broader world that everyone else lives in. That's what's so fascinating about that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a filmmaker and a content creator who now monetizes their channel on a different channel. Because my other channel, Soaring Studios 1207, yeah, that's monetized. This channel's not monetized yet, but I do want to monetize it at some point, even though I want to make both long form and short form content expressing my opinions on various topics, usually within the range of media, to epistemology, to metaphysics, to the paranormal, to cultural, cultural discussions, to politics a little bit, to my own life experiences as a type 1 diabetic, bicultural individual who wants to share all of these experiences I've had in life with you in the camera. These are all things that it makes me fascinated in doing this anyways, because it's accessible. Anyone now with access to the internet and with access to media technology can pick up a camera and make a movie or a video or an essay or content that really, it helps them to express what they are interested in, what they want to share. And hell, that's one of the reasons why social media exists in the first place. But social media, is run by algorithms that not everybody can control and not everybody wants to participate in, right? It always recommends to you content and posts that doesn't always bring the best of you, right? It brings that sense of jealousy and envy when you realize people live different lives than you. And the thing is that you're not supposed to compare your life to someone else's life, right? That's the thing too, is that fiction, you can get away with this because it's fiction, right? Fiction reflects someone's background, but this can also broadly appeal to people of different demographics who are going to look at different things, right? Oops, sorry. Yeah, they're going to look at different things when they watch the movie. But when it comes to social media, you have to remember that that's person's curation, that's their highlight reel, not their real life. And this goes with influencers, this goes with celebrities, this goes with content creators, this goes with people who are part of brands, where it looks like they have it all together. It looks like they're living the coolest life, or it looks like they have a very interesting lifestyle, or they dress in fashionable clothing. but we don't know what their actual life is like. And for all we know, their actual life could just resemble any other life, or can be much more miserable than we actually think. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very skeptical of social media algorithms, social media in general, even though I use it, because I know in the back of my mind that, yeah, people are obviously curating, people obviously, tweak the image and use effects, use lighting, or use the app's built-in features to enhance the image. It's cool, it's well done, I'll admit, but obviously they're doing it to curate for the image, for for Instagram or for TikTok, right? I don't use it to compare them to me, because that's not how it works. The whole point is that you use social media to share what you're interested in, share what you want to share with the world, to your family and friends, express opinions, upload content, post images, videos. That's the purpose of social media, and that's how we should use it. I would like to use social media more often. I wish social media was not so restricted to the point where, like, if you use music or footage that's copyrighted, oh man, you're gonna get copyrighted. And on YouTube, same thing here, man, with the algorithm detecting, content on a YouTube video, where if you have like more than 5 seconds of footage from a movie or music or whatever, you're gonna get copyrighted, and that really sucks. Which is why we have to be careful with it, right? We have to be clever with how we use these things, so that way we can get around it while not allowing YouTube, its algorithm, the system that runs the whole thing, to detect our content and take it down just because we're trying to be creative, right? Yeah, we should not allow the algorithm to do that. So that's why we should be clever with it. But yeah, I wanted to bring up this topic because, well, it's something that just fascinates me, yeah, and it's something that I wanted to express here, because I was watching Paranormal Activity 1 and 2, and I was already reminded of that found footage horror films, they're very different compared to algorithmic horror. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the restraint that they have, the minimalistic approach that they have, and how small scale it all feels, yeah, it's something that I really like. It's something that I can really appreciate. And it makes me want to rewatch these films and talk about them and share it with you guys here on the internet. I don't know if I would go as far as setting up cameras in my house just to create that sense of surveillance where I can spot people's actions and people's habits and activities, or even catch a glimpse of the other side. I don't know if I would go that far, but yes, it is interesting. And hell, the place that I work as a communications assistant at the church that we go to, and there, yes, my responsibility is to look over the camera system and also help out with the flyers and with the broadcasting and the streaming, so that way the event that goes on at the church gets recorded, and I also make sure that the cameras are all set up, and I know what buttons to click, so that way the footage can be transmitted and it can look great on screen. So that's one of my jobs that I'm doing. I'm applying to multiple jobs, so that way I can earn money, and that way I can gain the experience necessary, because I'm someone that's now, like, I'm done with college now. I'm a 25-year-old who's done with college, and I haven't gotten my degree yet for some bizarre reason. I'm sure it'll come, but like, I've talked to Nova, I've talked to the counseling, and the closest they said is, oh, just wait for it, or that's gonna come to your door. I'm like, okay, and it's been weeks and nothing official has happened, so it makes me wonder what exactly was the point of that, and if I have to do anything else to contact them to see if my degree is gonna come in some way or shape or form. But the good thing is that I was listed on the dean's list with the school's website, which means I was one of the students recognized for an outstanding academic performance. Hey, that's great. And that's a sign that, you know what, maybe something's at play here, because when it comes to degrees and things like that, it takes a while, right? Because the college system reads through it, right? Reads through it. Many people are graduating, and some people get their degrees on stage, some people get their degrees at home. I chose to get mine at home, because after COVID, I was like, yeah, you know what, I don't think I'm gonna graduate college in the old-fashioned way. I'm gonna do it in the get your degree delivered approach, because I'm very pragmatic. I like to do what works. So I wanted to share you guys all of that, and sorry for that ramble about college and job application and where I work and why I'm interested in media and technology in general, and how the paranormal films and everything that I've talked about has been circling to that topic. Yeah, that was a bit of a ramble, but still, I brought all of that up because it really goes to show that horror is not what it used to be, and it makes me mad that the horror genre really is, at the end of the day, its own algorithmic industry, and it makes me want to push back on it. But I still like to work within it anyways, because YouTube is run by an algorithm after all, and we still have to operate in it. And the kind of horror that I like to do is found footage, or more suspenseful, or more minimalistic, or more psychological, or more of the ambiguous, allows people to interpret things in their own way. I strongly disagree with horror that tries to push a certain socio-political agenda, or is clearly done for the algorithm, or has such a huge discourse on it that it makes me turn around from it, because at the end of the day, just because it's popular, that doesn't mean it's something I have to agree with. But on the other hand, it's also something that I feel it's good to talk about, because popular films do contribute to the larger cultural discussion anyways, right? But like I said, I'm not obligated to like everything just because it's popular, or just because it's trending, or just because everyone talks about it, right? Plenty of films I do not like. 2017 is filled with films I didn't like. Get Out, Star Wars The Last Jedi, Lady Bird, Shape of Water, they all stink. Todos apestan, which in Spanish means they all stink. Yeah, they all stink. They are not very good. In those 4 films that I've mentioned, none of them are really for me. I can criticize each movie if I want, but I'm not going to, because that's a waste of time. And other content creators have done it anyways, right? So I don't feel like I should or have to, but if I could, I mean, I could share with you in the camera, but I'm not going to, because that's a waste of time, right? I want to talk about things that actually make me passionate, things that actually make me want to, make videos on YouTube, that makes me want to make films, that makes me want to work in things like media, or editing, or communications assistance, or any other job that I can think of, with the skill sets that I have, because it really is a way to engage with life, right? I like to engage with life more directly. It's one of the reasons why I don't go on social media all that much. It's one of the reasons why I don't go on TikTok or Instagram all that much, because when you're on TikTok or Instagram, you're spending hours looking at other posts, looking at other reels or edited videos, and it reminds you that not all of it that you see is true. It's done to curate a specific image to fit a narrative of what people's lives are, but you never know for certain what that other person's life actually is, which is why I said earlier, don't compare your life to someone else's life on social media, because the only life that you're obligated to live is yours. And when you spend too much time on the internet looking at your life to someone else's life, you don't get the time to really examine your life and appreciate what you already have. And I have a lot of things. If you want proof, look right there. I have a ton of things right there on my bookshelf. I got movies up there that I watch. I got books right there that I read of various different subjects, genres, authors, and formats that they cover right there. See? And yeah, that's my workspace right there. Oops, sorry. It's my chair. That's my Mac computer right there, and that's the TV. That's where I was watching Paranormal Activity right there. So yeah, I wanted to show you a little bit of my room layout. Hold up. There we go. I wanted to show you a little bit of my room layout right there to give you a little bit more context of where I'm filming this. But yeah, been going on a 33-minute rant. Okay, so 7 more minutes, and then I'll call it a quits. Okay, so yeah, this is something that I really wanted to go on to in order to let my mind go off the rails with the topic that I was covering today, because it's something that does give me, it really does exert that passion out of me, right? To really talk about it. And because I really enjoyed watching the movies, the Paranormal Activity 1 and 2 films, and how they were made, and that minimalist approach that they took with the genre, and how interesting it is that they blend real world elements like media technology, surveillance systems, and recording life or documenting life, either in search of something beyond our understanding, or to simply view the lives of humans and how people live their lives. Something that's very interesting, because it really holds a mirror of how we live our lives, and yet we document things, with our cameras and with our surveillance systems in ways that we don't always notice, but it's there because it helps us monitor, our and track, what we do each day and the things that we're supposed to do, right? These are things that helps us keep in track of who we are and what we do on a daily basis, and some of the things that we might capture on occasions, right? It's something that I am interested in. It's something that I'm glad that films like Paranormal Activity or Blair Project, or even films like Cloverfield or Wreck, or the whole analog horror trend that you see on the internet do, right? People are interested in documenting life as it is, and it helps them to engage with it even when things are hard right now, because society right now is going through a restructuring, in a post-COVID era that is very difficult for a lot of people. Many people are struggling with housing prices, with low-wage jobs, and unemployment, healthcare, healthcare costs, as well as mental health issues. There's a lot of doom scrolling content that you see on the internet where people post videos claiming that, oh, it's over now, oh, people are giving up on life, or oh man, people of this generation can't grow up or whatever. I tend to ignore these videos because they are a way of discouraging people from taking action, doing what you can, take control of your life and of your situation. You only have control over your thoughts, your actions, and your life in general. You don't have control over the economy. You don't have control over the healthcare system. You don't have control over the restructuring of society, or over the technological surveillance systems that we live in. We don't have control over that, but we can control our reaction to them. And if we find ways of navigating them, that's great. And I think that's what people should do. If anything, I encourage you to not watch doom scrolling content on the internet, or self-help videos that actually cause more procrastination than actionable steps. It's okay to watch some self-help. It's okay to read some of it. Hell, some of the books I have are self-help, but I read them because they're interesting, because there's some ideas here and there that I would say, yeah, I actually kind of like what the author was writing about, but ultimately I don't really agree with what they're saying, because they're writing it from their background. What may work for them may not work for you, and that's something to respect. But the benefit of it is that it's abstract enough to where you can extract from what they're saying while discarding the rest. And the other thing too is you can read them as stories, because they use story examples here and there. That's the thing that people forget, is that self-help literature isn't just about, oh, here are the steps for you to improve your life. They use stories, they use examples, they try to base their findings off of scientific research, at least the scientific research available to them at the time, where it's not just abstract, actionable steps of 1, 2, 3, here's how you become successful, here's how you can be productive each day, here's how you can stop procrastination, here's how you can improve your life. It's not just that. They're telling you stories about these steps that people have taken that have actually impacted real communities, real people, real lives, and all that stuff that makes the topic very tangible. It's something that should encourage people that you should take action, you should be practical, you should be productive each day. You know what I mean? You don't have to hustle and grind like 24 hours in a day, right? No one can do that, because that's not realistic and it's not good for your health. To be hustling, grinding, because you're going to burn out spectacularly. What they're encouraging is try to be actionable each day, right? Set a goal in mind, set a timer also too, and simply commit to that goal, once the timer starts. Once you have that goal in mind, focus on that, without much distractions, and see how much you achieve, right? We actually achieve more by doing less, and that's how it's done. And the other thing too is treat it as a process, right? Don't expect some grand reward. Don't expect, to be successful instantly. Treat things and accept things as they are without guarantees, right? Because even if you don't succeed initially, even if you don't get the rewards right away, the fact is that you took action. You did things that you had to do, and it's motivating you to pursue the next thing, right? And that's how habits accumulate. That's how they build up, and they shape you to make better decisions over time, right? And that's what you want to do. And I've taken that advantage where I've done things like applying to jobs. I've done things like writing scripts. I've done things to like uploading videos on the internet. And editing them, and working on them. I'm working on a video myself right now that that I'm gonna upload on my my other YouTube channel, right? Showing up each day to do the work. Like I said, I work as a communication assistant at the Iglesia Palabra Church that's located in McLean. I show up there on Thursdays and occasionally on Saturdays, but I do really count those 2 days for when I work there, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. Even when I don't get paid, even when it's an unpaid internship, even when I don't feel like going, I still do it anyways because it's necessary. It builds that routine, right? I see it as something that, really helps me to structure my life in a way that is great. And that's what I want the job to be. That whatever job I land in, that's what I want it to be. It's functional, it's efficient, it's something where I know the routine, I know what to do, and I just do it anyways, right? And after that, that's the time when I reflect. That's the time when I ponder. That's the time when I really have my time to myself to really do the things that I want to do. And that's how habits form. And I'll give you an example of this. Okay, so I have this book right here. This is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And even though I haven't read the whole book, one of the things that the book touches on is the feedback loop, right? Where basically habits form not just because you do something, but it forms because it's like a paradigm, right? It's a system that you rely on for you to notice the things that you're doing. And I'm reading some of it right here too. Like I said, I haven't read the whole book yet, but I am reading it. Currently, I'm on page 43 right there. And this is where I'm reading these things where, you have to treat it as a paradigm. Treat it as something that, a system that monitors, your next level of thinking, your next level of actionable steps, and the things that really helps to treat habits not just as these are things that I do, or these are hobbies that I partake in. These are things that you're applying each day that shifts, shift the paradigm. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's how he calls it. That's how the author Stephen R. Covey calls it. He calls it a paradigm that is constantly shifting because you're adjusting to it, right? Habits are, yes, they have a feedback loop. You got the cue, you have the routine, and then you have the reward, and then it's a feedback loop. In fact, I have another habit book that touches on that. And it is none other than this one right here. This is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and despite this being on the older side, this is the 10th anniversary, he too touches on the habit loop model, where he basically argues that, and here it is right here on page 58, he argues that a habit is formed by forming a cue or finding a cue that triggers the habit, and then the routine, which is the actual habit itself, where you actually do it. You don't think about it, you don't ponder about it, you just do it. And then the reward is that you have something that satisfies you, something that gets the results, right? And in this example, it's brushing teeth, right? The cue is your teeth are dirty, the routine is you wash your teeth with a toothbrush, and then the reward is that you have cleaner teeth or better smelling teeth or whatever it is. And then it repeats, right? It repeats so that way it signals to your brain that you do it again and you don't forget, because now it's locked into your memory. It's now locked into your cognition, and that's something that Charles Duhigg explores. That's where the habit loop model forms. Now, that habit loop model has been refined over time, admittedly. His is not the only example, but it's an example that I think is very good to circle around, because that's how habits have formed naturally. You notice something, and it's something that propels you. Wait, what up? I like the smell of this. Yeah, I really like the smell of books too. I was smelling it. Anyways, so yeah, you notice the cue that triggers you to take action, and then when you have the cue there, you take the action, and then that becomes part of the routine, right? Whether you're working out and you see you see bench presses, or you see the weightlifting, whether you see your computer and then you see the spreadsheets or the notes or the journals or the script or the project that you got to do, and you work there online on your computer, or you see the filmmaking equipment, you see your camera, you see the tripod, you see the lighting, you see the film script, you see the filmmaking equipment. That encourages you to actually take action and make the movie, make the video that you're going to make. And then the reward for each of those would be that, oh, you have a great snack. You know, you drink water after you work out, or you take a break and you read a book after you do your assignments on the computer. Or with film, you know, you also read a book also, or you sit there and wait, or you look at the next line in the script, or you simply, you know, look around and enjoy the outside, right? That's how habits form. And that is something that I think is very interesting to examine, especially with our own lives, where we don't think about it all the time on a conscious level. Hold up. Okay, so I'm back. I did say that I was going to stop at 40 minutes, but that's fine. We're going to continue. What time is it right now? Yeah, it's 10:49. Yeah. I'm gonna record for another like 10-15 minutes, maybe. I don't know. Okay. So as I was saying, yeah, it is a structured routine that shows you see the cue, you see what you got to do right there, you see the thing that propels you to take action, and then once you have the cue in sight, you take action. You know, you just do it, and you set yourself a record amount of time for you to do the work, do the task that needs to be done. And that's how you become productive. That's how you know, consistently engage with the work that needs to be done. And that's how you push the boulder up the hill, as Albert Camus wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, another book which I do have, and I'll give you proof. See, I have the book right here. And yes, I have been reading it. And Albert Camus is an incredible writer. He was a very interesting French-Algerian novelist, playwright, philosopher, and just writer in general. And yes, he reflected a lot of what I'm saying right now. You know, the habit loop model and the pushing up the boulder, yeah, very similar, right? Very similar frameworks. But this one's more philosophical, whereas the Power of Habit and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, they're more structural, they're more functional, right? They're more about actionable steps, but using, you know, more scientific, more epistemological frameworks, and not just magical, do this and your life will be much better. You know, because those books examine the nature of habits. They examine, you know, what goes into habit making, why do people form them and things like that. Whereas Albert Camus was more so reflecting on why humans choose to persist even in the absence of meaning. But that act of persistence can resemble a habit. It can resemble a routine. And Albert Camus was arguing that in the absence of any objective meaning, whether anything given by the divine or by society or by the social narratives that we're raised by, or just by the lack of any inherited meaning, we have to make the meaning ourselves. And that forms part of our routine where, you know, we take action to make sure that it gives our lives directions as we push the boulder up the mountain. And even though we don't know if there's going to be a top that we reach, or we don't know if there's going to be a cliff, or we don't know if there's going to be a reward, the fact is we are still choosing to persist anyways, because that's the point. The point is that you are continually acting on the task that needs to be done, which is pushing the boulder up the hill. And you can apply this metaphor to things like, you know, your job space, where you have to work hours at a time, a day or a night, for you to complete the tasks. You know, and the point isn't that, oh, you earn money, you earn a paycheck, or that you've conquered the whole system, or that you've beaten the whole task. The point is that you've acted, is that you took action, and that you pushed that boulder up, and that it propels you to keep living anyways. Yeah, that's the point. It's interesting, but it's also very existentially frustrating, because it tells us that, yeah, there's probably not going to be an end to this, or that we don't know in what way or shape or form we will be recognized by this. Yeah, we don't know if all of this will have some sort of meaning anyways, but we're going to keep pushing on anyways, because that fulfills us. You know, the struggle towards the heights itself is enough to fill a man's heart. You know, one must imagine Sisyphus happy, right? Yeah, that's a quote that is in this book. I know it's been said 1,000 times, but it's still a very profound and very mesmerizing quote right there. Okay, what up? Okay, so yeah, that's the thing too. I went from talking about the paranormal activity films to criticizing modern horror to talking about my interest in media and technology and how that links to the paranormal films to examining, people's lives on social media and why you shouldn't compare your life to someone else's life to talking about self-help to then talking about productivity and habit formation and then Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus and how it all ties together. Yeah, surprising, right? Yeah, I really like that too. I really like synthesizing different ideas because I noticed that. I'm the kind of person that notices these underlying patterns and connections that other people may miss. And on a subconscious level, I notice it because I've seen it many times. And it's something that I feel is automatic, but also something that you need to look more carefully. I got that analytical sense where, oh, I see the deeper patterns here. It might mean something, it might not mean anything, you know what I mean? But it's interesting that they put it in there anyways because it adds to what we're seeing. It takes what otherwise should be abstract into something actionable, something that's embodied, and that's something I really like. And the reason why that's important is because philosophy shouldn't just be abstract. It shouldn't just be detached, academic lectures about talking about different philosophical frameworks. It should be something that is embodied in real life, such as what I'm doing right now, where I've chose to pick up my phone, talk about the topics that I've listed, almost an hour ago, and we're almost an hour in, and yeah, I no doubt you've heard me ramble about so much, and yet I still chose to do it anyways. So yeah, it's one of those things where like you really need to embody it. You really need to take that philosophy and do it anyways. And if it doesn't work, okay, try it again. If it works, great. And see how that works within the larger systems that we live in. Because at the end of the day, we all live not just in the same system, but we are products of multiple systems colliding with each other. And the more you notice that, the more you can't unsee it, right? And that's something that interests me because it's why film remains interpretive. It's why media is something that has a lot of different elements to it that people will pick up on. It's one of the reasons why people are drawn to storytelling because there's different ways to look at it. People will emphasize this, others will emphasize this, others will see this, others will notice that part. And it adds to the broader cultural conversation where people are really encouraged to participate in it anyways. Yeah, to really go out there and participate in the world as much as we are absorbing or observing the narratives that are in it. That's part of the reasons why I criticized modern horror like 20 minutes ago, because I noticed that modern horror doesn't really touch on the things that makes horror what it is, and I also criticize it for a lot of reasons, on a cultural level, on a political level, and on a algorithmic level that shows this is what studios are now prioritizing, and I need to call that out. Because horror that's great, horror that's like suspenseful, that's minimalistic, that gets straight to the point, and it doesn't tell people what to think, it just shows people what makes something scary and what makes something uncertain and what makes something that's really worth engaging with anyways, like the Paranormal Activity films or Blair Witch Project or analog horror that you see on the internet. Yeah, it's great. It's really great to engage with these things, and it really propels you to create your own version of them. And that's why I'm creating my own versions, even while using intellectual IP, which by the way I do not own the rights to. I always try to give credit. I always try to make sure I put it in the description that it belongs to X company or belongs to X corporation, so that way it shows I play by fair use, even though fair use is pretty sketchy. But still, I create my own stop motion. I create my own videos to show that yes, I'm engaging in this too, and I'm even making money off of it. And I want to make money off of this. I want to make lots of money doing this stuff, and it's a passion that I am living for, and this is something that I do want to live for, especially for the rest of my life. And it propels me to watch films like Paranormal Activity or Cloverfield or Wreck or the Blair Witch Project. These are among my favorite films because they use that media technology aspect to record life as it is going on, but also through the lens of knowing that this is speculative. This could happen, this could not happen, or this resembles something that you've seen before, but you just didn't have the language for it. You didn't have the camera to record it. Maybe you didn't have you didn't formalize the language to really articulate what you went through, but it's something that really propelled you to, you know, pick up a camera and record it and document it and take notes about it anyways, because we are participating in life. You know, we are recording things as they happen, but we're still interpreting it through our own lens. And that's the thing to look out for too, is that not all interpretations that you see on the internet really are yours. You know, they are someone's interpretation, but you can still like them at the end of the day. And that's something that propels people to become filmmakers, artists, content creators, writers, and all that jazz. Yeah, it's something that I really cannot wait to. I really cannot, you know, wait to do. You know, it's something I am looking forward to do. It's something that propels me to continue writing and continue going anyways, especially with the book collection that I have, where I will keep reading the books and also keep uploading videos. I know it's been a while. It's been 2 weeks since I've uploaded my last video, and this video is extremely long, probably the longest video I've made on this channel so far, but still, it is something that propels me to keep going forward, and hopefully I bump into something, right, that really does, you know, take what I'm doing right now into the next level, whether it is earning money from a job, or whether it is, you know, working on the next film project, or it is, you know, moving up from one position to the next, or gaining new skill sets, or writing a story that I've always wanted to write. I've always wanted to write that story. I just didn't know how to write it. You know, I'm writing scripts myself. The feature film script that I'm writing, which I won't give away, is currently at 25 pages. I've stopped because I had to focus so much on academia, so much on working, and so much on, holy fucking crap, so much on getting my life together, especially on a lot of levels. That shows I don't have time to write a film script, right? I know some people can write a film script in under a month. I wish I could do that too, but realistically, I can write a film script within several months, right? And if I'm consistent with writing at least 1 page or 2 pages a day, I can, you know, like, I can probably get up to 100 pages, 120 pages in maybe 2 months, 3 months maybe, especially with the film that I'm writing. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see where that's gonna go if I'm consistent with that. And that's something that I want to change going forward, because the last script that I just wrote, it took me like a day or two to write the whole thing, and it was like 11 pages. Yeah, it wasn't that long. It took me like a day to write it, maybe 2 days, I don't remember, especially with the rewrites. Yeah, but still, that is all I wanted to talk about. This video went on for an hour now, and I really am glad for anyone who made it this far, who's been watching it from the beginning and had to listen to me rambling about everything from Paranormal Activity to criticizing modern horror to habits to the nature of doing things out of routine, talking a little bit about existentialist philosophy, to showing a little bit of my book collection, to now talking about the things that really excite me going forward, and why I, you know, want to act anyways, even when there is no guarantees. So yeah, this was a 1 hour long rant about all of that stuff. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think? What do you think about the topics that I touched on today? Let me know what are some of your favorite horror films, or, you know, criticized horror films. You know, what are some of the routines and habits that you do? What are some things that really brings you passion about it? And what are the things that you do with media and technology that makes you want to be a filmmaker or a content creator or someone that makes videos? You know, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment down below your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and stay notified by hitting the notification bell icon. And without further ado, yeah, I'll see you in the next video. But hold up, I'm going to have this video keep running, right? Yeah, wait until it hits 1 hour, and then I'll go. 31, 27, 26, 25, 24, Okay, that's it. Yep. 5 seconds left, and yeah, that's it. Bye, and good night.